have Mr. Schneebaum to talk about legal battle against LTT in USA. Stephen is an attorney at Stephen M. Schneebaum, PC, helping people with international issues. He was selected to Super Lawyers for 2007, 2010, 2013 to 2022. Super Lawyers is an exclusive list of top-rated attorneys in specific practice areas who were chosen after thorough evaluation of numerous criteria. We welcome Stephen now.
It is a great honor for me to be invited to speak to this inaugural ceremony of the TGTE Parliament this morning, and I am most grateful to your Prime Minister, Mr. Visubanathan Rudrakumaran, for extending this invitation to me. All of you in this assembly are familiar with the efforts of the TGTE to bring about the delisting of the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam as a proscribed organization under the laws of England and Wales. My goal today is to familiarize you with parallel work being done here in the United States to delist the LTTE under the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act of 1996. The statute in this country provides for the proscription of foreign terrorist organizations, FTOs, should the Secretary of State make findings concerning the involvement of such organizations in acts of terrorism, such as assassinations, hijackings, bombings, and other comparable criminal conduct. To be listed as an FTO, a group must have the capability and intent, those are the critical words, the capability and intent to engage in those categories of acts, and it must thereby threaten United States nationals or the national security of the United States. As the law was originally written in 1996, designations were effective for 2 years and had to be reevaluated after that time. But after amendments to the statute in 2007, this was changed to a duration of 5 years, subject to review, with the opportunity for the organization to urge delisting on the basis of changed circumstances. The LTTE was originally listed as an FTO in 1997, and the designation has been renewed periodically, with the most recent determination announced in 2016. Under statutory procedures, the Secretary is therefore required to reconsider the evidence in 2021, and he announced his intention to do so in October. In late July of this year, on behalf of the TGTE, my law firm filed a petition with the Secretary to delist the group, and that request is currently pending before the Department of State. In our 42-page submission, and in its 5-page supplement addressing the conclusions of Secretary Patel in the UK, we made essentially 2 very straightforward arguments. First, the LTTE effectively ceased to have the organizational capacity to engage in terrorism when the civil war in Sri Lanka ended in 2009. And it no longer has either the capability or the intent to do so. And second, we contended that the continued listing in the absence of evidence has the presumably unintended consequence of deterring entirely peaceable organizations, like the transnational government, from recruiting, enlisting, or working together with supporters from the Tamil diaspora or otherwise from publicly espousing the cause of Tamil Eelam. For both of these reasons, individually and together, there is no longer a proper statutory basis for the listing, with its very serious consequences for defenders of the Tamil cause. Providing material support for an FTO in the United States is a criminal offense, and our Supreme Court has held that this interference with what might otherwise seem to be protected political activity is constitutionally justified. But the law is clear. The Secretary must be able to report based on a defined record that the banned organization is currently engaged in prohibited activities. And as you are all aware, that is no longer true of the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam. We have taken great care to demonstrate to the department that the allegations of ongoing LTTE violence, including those on which the Home Secretary of the United Kingdom continues to rely, are unsupported by the facts. We do not and cannot deny that certain individuals in Sri Lanka who may have had past involvement with the LTTE have been accused, with or without evidence, of preparing for or committing acts of physical violence or cyber attacks with potentially harmful effects. But that does not, of course, demonstrate the resurgence of an organization without leadership, without headquarters, without assets, and certainly without weapons. As a highly respected United States appellate judge, Richard Posner, recently articulated in a judicial opinion, and I'm quoting, "An organization is not a terrorist organization just because one of its members commits an act of armed violence without direct or indirect authorization, even if his objective was to advance the organization's goals," unquote. And in this case, it is no longer appropriate even to refer to potential culprits as members rather than as former members of the LTTE. It is important for me to communicate to you that we have not asked the department to endorse the cause of Tamil Eelam, nor would it be appropriate for us to do so. We do not ask it to address the human rights abuses against the Tamil community attributed to the Sri Lankan government. We most assuredly do not address the question whether the listing of the LTTE in 1997 and its renewals were appropriate. Rather, we ask only that the government recognize the legitimacy of the political ambitions of the Tamil diaspora. We ask, in other words, simply for the right to have the question of Tamil independence debated freely and openly and without hindrance in the United States in the marketplace of ideas, unhindered by the coercive power of the state to delegitimize one side of that debate. And of course, for that reason, the political issue cannot be entirely separated from the legal one. When the United States condemns the LTTE as a terrorist group, it invites the inference, despite Judge Posner's warning, that all who support a separate Tamil state are at least affiliated with, if not openly supporters of, terrorist tactics to achieve that goal. And that is deeply unfair. It is why the Sri Lankan state is so keen to keep the LTTE proscribed, and why the Sri Lankan embassy reacted so strongly to a bill introduced last year in the House of Representatives that refers to the LTTE as, quote, an armed Tamil independence organization, and not as a terrorist organization. The ambassador also reacted strongly to the measure's reference to the northeast of the country as, quote, the traditional Tamil homeland, and to that area as historically oppressed. The Sri Lankans' response predicted that, quote, the resolution's willful ignorance of the USA's own security concerns about the LTTE and its front organizations, and efforts at glorification of terrorism will give inspiration to rump elements of the LTTE and its numerous front organizations within the US and across the world, as well as to other terrorist organizations. In other words, although the statute is written in such a way as to condemn and delegitimize organizations using violence to promote their goals, its impact is to put the thumb of the United States on one side of the scale, the side condemning not terrorist tactics, but the goals of an entirely peaceful political movement. This raises an important question, which I suspect is on the minds of many members of this audience. Is the case for delisting of the LTTE ultimately a political matter or a legal one? Let me turn to that question now. The answer is, simply, it is both. The decision to maintain or to revoke the listing will be taken by Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who is, of course, a political appointee of the President of the United States. But Secretary Blinken is also sworn to apply the law within his remit fairly and equitably. He cannot and will not make a determination that the LTTE should be delisted because he has been asked to do so by powerful political operatives. To order the delisting, he must make public findings, and those must withstand scrutiny in the court of public opinion. The statute permits Congress to demand delisting, although since enactment in 1996, this has never happened, and the chances of it happening in the current political atmosphere are zero. It also, however, allows and even requires the Secretary to order delisting when circumstances have changed. And this has happened numerous times over the past 25 years, including very recently. The department only last week delisted the Colombian guerrilla organization known as the FARC, the Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia, despite its very active engagement in terrorism and armed insurgency over decades, because circumstances have changed. It has delisted other such groups, the Real IRA, Tupac Amaru, others, that have ceased their violent activities even when they have openly targeted US citizens and US interests. So for the Secretary to do the right thing in this case, to recognize that the LTTE does not currently have the capability and intent to engage in terrorism, he must reach that conclusion based on evidence. By all means, the support of members of Congress urging that outcome would be most welcome. The raising of the profile of the issue, making it harder for inertia rather than reason to drive the conclusion, would be most welcome. But at the end of the day, the decision that Secretary Blinken must make requires him to assess evidence and to measure that evidence according to legal standards. I should add that I come to this exercise with a certain amount of personal experience. I represented the People's Mojahedin Organization of Iran in its efforts to be delisted as an FTO beginning in 2008. Our petition was denied by Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, and her refusal to change her position was affirmed by her successor, Hillary Clinton. Ultimately, however, we were able to persuade the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit that the decision was not adequately grounded in evidence and that the government's hand was therefore forced. The PMOI was delisted by the department in September of 2012, and this remains the only illustration of a case in which the organization itself was able to use the legal process to achieve delisting. Of course, Secretary Clinton was subject to political influence, But at the end of the day, she properly handled the matter as one grounded in facts and evidence, and in the application of the law to that evidence. We are hopeful, of course, that our efforts to persuade Secretary Blinken will be successful. If they are, then the Tamil diaspora in the United States and organizations committed to Tamil Elam around the world should be able to assume the place in public discourse that they deserve to occupy. Moreover, the delisting will send a signal to the government in Colombo that it cannot glibly tar its political opponents with the brush of terrorism. If our efforts do not succeed, then a decision will have to be made concerning next steps. No such decision has yet been taken, and I am hopeful that whatever is to happen next will itself be the subject of lively and free debate among this group and among all of those who, like you, are committed to achieving Tamil Elam by orderly, peaceful, and democratic means. I am most grateful to you for your attention and for this opportunity to explain the legal strategy adopted under Rudra's guidance by the TGTE in the United States. I wish you the very best of everything as this sitting of Parliament gets underway, and if I may be bold enough to try to say so, Mikka Nanri. Thank you very much.
அமெரிக்காவில் தமிழீழ விடுதலை புலிகள் மீதான தடைக்கு எதிரான சட்டம் போராட்டம் குறித்தான அந்த வள அறிஞருடைய கருத்தினை இப்பொழுது நீங்கள் தமிழாக்கம் செய்து தருவதற்கு உங்களுக்கான நேரம்.
மிக்க நன்றி. அண்மையில் நீங்கள் சூப்பர் லாயர் என்று அமெரிக்காவில் அழைக்கப்படும் சட்டத்தரணி ஸ்டீன்பாம் அவர்களுடைய பேச்சை கேட்டீர்கள். அவர் அமெரிக்காவில் பிரித்தானியாவை போலவே ஏன் விடுதலை புலிகள் மேல் உள்ள தடை நீக்கப்பட வேண்டும் என்பதற்காக சட்ட போராட்டத்தில் நாடு கடந்த தமிழீழ அரசாங்கத்துக்காக ஈடுபட்டுள்ளார். அவர் இந்த தடை சார்ந்த பல விளக்கங்களை கொடுத்துள்ளார். இந்த பட்டியலில் தமிழர் விடுதலை புலிகள் ஏன் சேர்க்கப்பட்டனர், அதை எடுத்து என்ன செய்ய வேண்டும் என்பதை பற்றி மிக விளக்கமாக சொன்னார். குறிப்பாக அந்த அமைப்பு தமிழர் விடுதலை புலிகள் அந்த பட்டியலில் தொடர வேண்டும் என்றால் அதற்கு அவர்களுக்கு அந்த நோக்கம் இருக்க வேண்டும். அதற்கு அந்த பயங்கரவாத செயல்பாடுகளை செய்யக்கூடிய அவர்களுக்கு அந்த கேப்பபிலிட்டி அது இருக்க வேண்டும். அவர்களால் அதை செய்ய முடியுமா, பயங்கரவாதத்தை செய்ய முடியுமா அப்படிங்கிற கேள்வியும் அங்கே உள்ளது. அந்த இரண்டுமே தற்போது இல்லை என்பதை அவர் விளக்கமாக சொன்னார். மேலும் இந்த வரலாற்றில் கடந்த சுமார் 14 ஆண்டுகளில் 24 ஆண்டுகள் 1997 தான் இந்த தடை போடப்பட்டது. இந்த 24 ஆண்டுகளிலே எந்தெந்த 5 ஆண்டுகளுக்கு ஒரு முறை தற்போது இந்த தடை நீடிக்கப்படுகிறது. இந்த ஆண்டு தடை நீடிக்கப்படுமா இல்லையா என்பதுதான் கேள்வி. அதற்காக சட்ட போராட்டத்தில் அவர் ஈடுபட்டுள்ளார். இந்த வேண்டுகோளை செக்ரட்டரி ஆஃப் ஸ்டேட் பிளிங்கன் அவர்களிடம் தற்போது உள்ளது. இந்த தடை ஏற்படுத்தப்பட்ட அமைப்புகளிலே சில அமைப்புகள் மீது தடை விலக்கப்பட்டுள்ளது. உதாரணமாக கொலம்பியா நாட்டில் உள்ள ஃபார்க் என்ற அமைப்பு மீது ஏற்படுத்தப்பட்ட தடை நீக்கப்பட்டது. அதே போல ஈரானிய நாட்டைச் சேர்ந்த பீப்புள்ஸ் முஜாஹிதீன் என்ற அமைப்பை தடை செய்திருந்தார்கள். அந்த தடையை எதிர்த்து ஸ்டீவன் ஸ்டீன்பாம் அவர்கள் வழக்காடு மன்றத்திலே வழக்காடி அந்த வழக்காடு மன்றம் அந்த தடை போடப்பட்டது தவறானது, அதற்கான முகாந்திரம் இல்லை என்று அவர் வாதாடி அதில் வெற்றி பெற்றார். பின்னர் அந்த வெற்றியை ஒட்டி அமெரிக்க ராஜாங்க திணைக்களம் மற்றும் செக்ரட்டரி ஆஃப் ஸ்டேட் ஹிலரி கிளின்டன் அந்த தடையை நீக்கினார். அது திரு ஸ்டீவன் அவர்களுடைய மிகப்பெரிய வெற்றி. அதே போல இந்த ஆண்டும் தமிழீழ விடுதலை புலிகளுக்கு எதிரான தடையை எதிர்த்து ராஜாங்க திணைக்களம் ஸ்டேட் டிபார்ட்மெண்டிடம் இந்த விண்ணப்பம் வைக்கப்பட்டுள்ளது. அதை அவர்கள் மிக கூர்மையாக நோக்கி கொண்டுள்ளார்கள். மிக விரைவில் நமக்கு ஒரு நல்ல செய்தி வரும் என்ற நம்பிக்கையில் காத்திருக்கிறோம். திரு ஸ்டீவன் அவர்களுக்கு நமது மனமார்ந்த நன்றிகள்.
மிக்க நன்றி சுந்தர் குப்புசாமி அவர்களுக்கும் இதேவேளை ஸ்டீவன் அவர்களுக்கும் எங்களுடைய நாடு கடந்த தமிழ் அரசாங்கத்தின் சார்பிலும் உலக தமிழ் மக்கள் சார்பிலும் நாங்கள் நன்றியை கூறிக்கொள்கின்றோம்.
டிவிஐ யூடியூப் சேனலில் இணைந்திருக்கும் நேர்கள் அனைவருக்கும் எமது நன்றி. எமது காணொளி தொகுப்புகளை தொடர்ந்து நீங்கள் பார்வையிடுவதற்கு கீழிருக்கின்ற பெல் பட்டனை அழுத்துவதனூடாக நோட்டிபிகேஷனில் பல காணொளி தொகுப்புகள் உடனுக்குடன் உங்களை வந்து சேரும். அருகில் இருக்கின்ற முக்கிய காணொளி தொகுப்புகளையும் பார்வையிட தவறாதீர்கள்.